Hey, friends. Today I am speaking with my friend John Wang for an episode on the podcast. John's been on before. A couple of years ago, we sat in his apartment and talked about everything that was happening in his business and his life as a coach. And since then, he's written and released a book called Big Asian Energy. And we talk about some of the themes in that book and what it was like for him to write that book in this episode. I always love talking with John. He's like such uplifting, positive energy, and a guy who's just like forever focused on growing, forever focused on growing. He's an inspiring figure, and I'm happy to know him. And I was happy to have him on the show to talk more about his book and some of those elements. On this episode, we talk about leadership. We talk about the qualities that we look up to in leaders and how sometimes you can smell inauthenticity in leaders and what that's like. And the tendency that we all have to think that we've got to put on a mask or perform for people and that's what leadership looks like. Like we just sort of imagine what the leadership hat looks like and we put it on and we act it. And that the truth is most people can see through that stuff, and our friends can see through that stuff when we're playing that game. And true friends see through it, and they see our essence. They see what's behind the act. They see what's behind our ego, and they love our essence, and they point that out to us, at particular moments. We talk about the difference between real humility and toxic humility being my word for it. But there is a way that a person can be too humble, and to a fault, right? And we talk about the cultural conditioning of where that originates in Asian culture. And, in general, we talk about the cultural conditioning that Asians live with in the Western world, Asian people, first, second, third generation, what it's like to grow up as a person of Asian descent in the Western world. And also to have this internal dissonance between the internal East and the internal West, and we talk about the differences between the cultures of the East, which is a broad generalization because there's so many, and the cultures of the West, and how they each actually have their benefits, but they also have their shadow, and yeah, really great conversation there about like how to find what works for you and figure out how to integrate that rather than there being a split inside of you. I think some people can relate to that when you're from two different cultures. You have these two sides of you and it's hard to reconcile them. And John shares about his own journey in that respect. And when he had this moment where, in a sense, like the Eastern side of him, including his friends and family, collided with the Western side of him. And how that was a big, actually beautiful, it was a scary moment for him, but it was a beautiful moment for him because he actually became more of an integrated human being in that moment. We also talk about what's behind that mask that I was referencing earlier, the mask that we put on and try to perform in the world. It's a wound. There's always a wound behind the mask. And we dig into in detail, like how to heal that wound, which I think was a really useful conversation. And John had lots of insight in that respect. We also talk about John's journey writing the book and the challenges that he had along the way. So really great conversation with John. If you like Tony Robbins, you're going to love John Wang, because he has this powerful, transformational way of communicating. And it's just always great to listen to him tell his stories and have him share his insights. So John and I met originally in the Arca Brotherhood. So fellas, if you're interested in joining a men's group, check out the Arca Brotherhood. And if you want to conquer your addictions, you've got something going on with addiction, whether it's alcohol, porn, social media, something that is sapping your energy and keeping you from being your best in your life, check out my addiction circle. I'll leave a link in the description. All right, folks, enjoy this episode with John Wang. Big Asian energy. I'm sitting with my brother, John Wang, for the second time on this podcast. John, it's a pleasure to sit and have a conversation with you, to interview you about your new book, Big Asian Energy. And yeah, first off, man, just congratulations on writing and finishing a book. Becoming an author is not easy. Your book is Big Asian Energy, an unapologetic guide for breaking barriers to leadership and success. Looks great, man.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's good to be back. And Ben, you and I, we've known each other for years. I want to say like almost a decade.
Almost a decade. Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah. So you've seen me in this entire journey, and witnessed, I would say, like when we're talking about the concept of leadership, because that's what the book is about, right? It's like leadership. But I think that leadership is not just like business or organizational leadership. Like leadership is how we show up in our everyday, and our work that you and I have gotten to know each other through. I feel like that's where the leadership seed is really planted. So it is a great thing to be here.
Yeah, we met. I think we met for the first time at a men's work weekend at Loon Lake outside Vancouver in what was then Samurai Brotherhood, which is now ARCA. And I think at the time you were the lieutenant of your squad, your group at the time, and you were looking at stepping up into captaincy. And I remember seeing you as green and eager, excited to learn, humble, curious, and yeah, you were my brother Ray's, brother-in-law, and I was like, okay, we roomed together. We shared the same room.
That's right.
Yeah, and beyond that weekend, the next point in my memory is that you became a captain, and within like a year, you started really getting engaged with the community, and you were like, hey guys, is there like a manual, like a captain's manual? And we were like, no, well, there's like this 3-page thing on like what you should read, and like here's a few things about how to run a group. But like until now, we've actually just been passing down the knowledge to each other verbally. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to start writing a manual. And if somebody wants to use it, then great. And so one day this draft pops up and it's like 78 pages or something. And this is all these different chapters, like on leadership, how to hold space, on how to not let your ego run the show. And it was all these reflections that you had. Like you just sat down and started writing like, okay, well, if I was going to write, I don't know everything about how to be a captain, but I'm going to start writing as I'm learning. And it was very good. It was very relatable. It was very enjoyable to read. It was just sort of like, in some ways, this flow of consciousness, like, okay, well, just, and you just took us on a ride of like your own learning journey. And it was really well done. I remember reading it and being like, wow, for a guy who doesn't have that much experience being a leader in our circles, this guy really knows a lot. And like he's downloading it quite quickly. And so your manual, even though we now have like a leadership training manual, your manual is still a core piece that all captains have access to and read, like it's got its place in our history.
Oh man, I'm stoked to hear that. I'm honored. And yeah, I'm a really big believer in just like, if you see that there's a need for something, go and figure it out and then put it together. And I think that as many as there are, as many books as there is out there, the truth is that we learn best through trial and error. And we learn best through observing other people. And that's exactly what I did. I was just like, I really, now that I'm getting into this, now that I'm being a more part of this group, I really want to contribute. And I think that's what leadership really is. It starts with a desire to contribute. It doesn't start with ego. It doesn't start with like, let's make it about me. Let's make it like, I want to tell people what to do. It really starts with, I feel like there's a gap and I feel like I could contribute. And I just interviewed and like talked to so many of the other captains. Like literally, I remember sitting down with captains of other groups, and I just went like, "Okay, tell me your secret. like, like, tell me how you can walk into a room with, let's be honest, a bunch of guys who are looking at you going, who are you to tell me what to do?" Because that's the kind of guys that we often attract in this type of work. And be able to be so, I just want to check here. What's the policy around swearing on this show?
You can swear.
Okay, good. That's what I thought, but I just want to double check. But the word that I had in mind was like, I remember being at the Loon Lake things and I would see these guys like you. And there's this like unfuckwithable vibe. Like when you're at the front, there's an energy that owns the room. And I was like, that. Like, I feel like I've spent so many of my years learning how to be liked, but I never learned how to do that. So yeah, so I went and I like interviewed Jason, I interviewed Doug, I just interviewed a bunch of guys, and I was like, let me come in. And I actually went to their squads, and I just watched them. I realized everyone had different styles, but there was something, and that's the thing, is that like I think that everyone has different definitions and frameworks and models. Like there is no one size fit all, but there is that I don't need anyone's permission to fully do this because I own that this is here in integrity and this is here to better those around me. And it's mission driven leadership. And I love that.
Yeah, there's like a je ne sais quoi right there that you were like describing that I've always, my big question is like, how do you impart that upon other people? And sometimes the word that feels most right for me is the word gravitas.
Yeah.
There's like a gravitas to a leader that you trust, where you trust his energy, and it's like clean and not like really sort of tyrant-y and not coming from ego, but just like real leadership. Yeah. Mission driven leadership. How, in your understanding, how do you get that? How does a guy without gravitas, let's say, achieve that in his life? Like, what does he have to go through? What does he have to do to get that?
Yeah, that's the question that I set out to answer in the book, really. And even in the work that we were doing there. The short answer is clarity. And I think that really what gravitas comes from, what we see when we look at somebody and we're like, this person has gravitas, is they're clear. And I'm not just talking about clarity in knowing where you're going, clarity of vision, which is usually what we think. Like, oh, that guy seems like he's clear and that he knows where he's going. But it's also clarity that he is not making it about him. And where we learn to trust, like I had guys in my group who I will look at and I'm like, I am not the smartest man in the room by far. I am not the most, successful guy in the room. I am not the most physically powerful, dominant guy in the room. As a matter of fact, what was so great about those squads was that it was almost like a testing ground. Because if you have an ounce of ego of trying to be like, I'm better than you, people see that and they go, oh, you don't trust yourself. And therefore, why should I listen to you? And, we had guys in our group who were much stronger, but I'm like, yes, and I'm not here to compete with you. I sit in the knowing that what I want to bring to the table has value. So therefore, I don't need to question my own value. I don't need to prove my own value. I don't need to beat you or be better than you because all of that is making it about me. So when there's clarity between people in the sense of like, look, I don't got an ego here. I'm here because I believe in a mission. It is undeniable and it is so hard to not want to follow somebody because you're like, I believe that what you're doing is going to support us because I don't think you're doing it about you.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's well said, man. Yeah, the ego. That what stuck out the most to me about what you said was that when you're coming from ego, that that what other people see is a lack of self-trust. They
Mhm.
see a performance. They see you needing to try hard to create an image or create an experience for people, like where you're like really kind of getting in there from a controlling place because you don't fully trust yourself, because you're not tapped into your inner knowing.
Mhm. Exactly. Right. Like we all kind of sense it. And we think that leadership is about like being loud or like the one who's just like alpha, like barking orders. But the truth is that when you see a guy who is trying to puff his chest, like trying to trying to like out alpha other people, you can feel it in your body and it's immediately a turn off. And it's just like, no, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're trying to convince me
Mm-hmm.
to follow. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to convince me, then you haven't convinced yourself. And if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't convinced yourself, then why am I going to follow you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really that initial work that in the very beginning I had to look at is like, if I'm stepping into this role, what is the energy that I am bringing to the table each time? Because yeah, you're sitting. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in a squad or if you're sitting in a meeting with like board people from the boardroom or people from your team, and there's that moment when everyone kind of looks up at you and you're about to say something, and there's this moment where they kind of go like they're almost invisibly sizing you up. And I think that is a very critical moment where the work that you've done before you walked in the room really matters,
Mm-hmm.
because if in that moment the first thing you try to do is being like, hey guys, we're gonna really make a change here and we believe in this, like as soon as you're in that energy of like trying
Yeah.
to perform, people go, okay, so I'm just dealing with your performance. Great, I'm okay with dealing with your performance. I'll just bring out my performance to deal with your performance.
Yeah.
But there's not a real trust that's underneath it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People can smell it when you're being a tryhard.
Oh man, it is a stink that is a mile away.
Yeah. Yeah. And my
Right.
favorite leaders, just like thinking about the leaders who I've looked up to most of my life, they are knowledgeable and have achieved some level of mastery in particular places.
Mhm.
And they're sharing that, but they're sharing it from a place of humility.
Mhm.
They're not dumping it, like they're tapering or titrating those teachings. They know what they're willing to admit what they don't know, like they can't answer every question and that they don't have dominion over everything. They're not an expert on everything. Like they know what they work on, and they're still curious. Like all the teachers that I love, they're curious still. They're still learning. They're still students.
Mhm.
And that hits home. And the last piece is comedy. My favorite teachers have been able to tell
Yep.
jokes amidst heavy moments, intense moments, amidst teachings. They can weave stories in. They can laugh at themselves. They show their own imperfection.
Mhm.
They're able to just like put themselves out there in the right capacity without just like totally dumping themselves in the middle of the floor
Mhm.
for everybody to take care of. They know themselves in a way where um, you can feel like they're not hiding, and
Mhm.
that they're able to laugh at their own humanity. They're able to laugh at life and the cosmic joke of all of this.
100%.
Yeah.
And that humility is not about putting themselves down as a performative act. And I think this
Mm-hmm.
is really
Yeah.
key because I see people doing this. Like they'll kind of do this humble or like humble bragging thing
Mm-hmm.
where they're still trying to persuade you to control your view of them. Right. Like they're
Yeah.
being humble, but you're like, I don't like, you're just joking. Like, I don't buy it. Like, really, what we're talking about is authenticity. Like,
Uh-huh.
right. Like the true leaders are just like, I'm just a person. My mission is bigger than me, but I'm just a person.
Yeah.
You asked me before, what is gravitas? And in my view, I think gravitas is actually based on two things: is assertiveness, which is your willingness to assert what it is that your beliefs are, what it is that you
Mhm.
stand for, and
Mhm.
speak for that unapologetically, but also compassion.
Mm.
And I think this is the part that makes the difference between somebody who's just barking orders, who is highly assertive, who's just like telling you what to do, and somebody who you talk to and you're like, no, you actually care about me. And that's where the humor comes from. That's where the I don't take myself so seriously come from. That's the, I'm not going to make jokes to make you laugh because I want you to like me. I'm making jokes so that the seriousness of this, which is so hard to hold, right? Because like we've worked with people who are going through tough days. Like I've had guys coming in
Yeah.
and they're having breakdowns, they're going through divorces, they're going through job changes, they lost family members, like some of the worst days of their lives. You can't be in there and try to impose what you want over them. You have to have the compassion and the love to be like, I'm here to hold that space and I'm
Mhm.
here to hold you. And I
Mhm.
think that's the combination, a balance between the heart of the assertiveness, that fire of assertiveness, and the heart of the compassion.
Mhm. The water, you could say. Yeah, in Arca we have a
Mm.
code: balance, passion, and compassion.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah. Passion and compassion.
Mhm.
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great intro, I think, to talking about your book, Big Asian Energy. Um, First of all, how does it feel to be done with this book? Like to be like, you're releasing this to this gets released tomorrow, like
This comes out tomorrow.
you were
Yeah.
on the eve of the release, and and what's that been like to like create this baby? Like you've created uh, uh, a book of ideas that cannot be uncreated.
It cannot be unclear.
You
That's
have
absolutely
birthed it. You have birthed
right.
a
I
child in a
appreciate
way.
it. This is, the dedication at the very front is to my parents, and it goes, they say writing a book is like birthing a child, so you can't give me shit for not giving you a grandson yet. We're working on it. We're working on it. Yeah. How does it feel? I don't think we talk about this enough because it is a lot. It's a lot of mixed experiences. Like there's some high highs and some low lows, and I did not foresee that. I think like the high one of the big moments was like right after I got a book deal. I was like, oh my God, I got a book deal. It's from like a major publisher. Like they're putting in resources and they're really putting their backing into it. Like I've done it. I like a friend of mine texted me and is like, congratulations, how does it feel to be a success? And I'm like terrifying. Like what the like what were they thinking? Like I have to write a book now. I've never written a book.
Yeah.
I've never done anything like this. They're like, oh yeah, like, get us our first draft. I'll give you 6 months time, something like that. And, I think we had to do it. Like, it's like the first half first, and then you give the second half. The total book number of words, like 90,000. I'm like, I've never written anything like this before. Like
Yeah.
I've written manual, like, yeah, the captain's manual. I've written other things in my past, but they're all like, less than 100 pages, nothing like
Mm-hmm.
this. So the first thing was terrifying because you suddenly realize that you have this immense responsibility.
Yeah.
And
And just to interject, like, I think people don't know this, but a lot of the time when you get a book contract, you haven't written the book yet. You've just written down your synopsis, you could say, or your summary of like what the book's going to be about. You've pitched your book
yeah,
to a publisher, and then they sign a contract with you, and then you go and write it. So that's the process. So you get this like container that you sign a contract for, and then you gotta like go get creative. So
yeah.
the like pressure to create something really good has never been higher than it is in that moment. And
Oh my God.
it's like it can be a huge weight. I saw
Yeah.
this. My wife's a writer, so I've seen this process that she went through, and it's unexpected. When you get that contract, you're like, oh damn, now I got to get to work, and I've got to like
Deliver.
I got to let the creativity flow under some measure of pressure, right? And those two things, those are hard to balance.
Dude.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I think in particular because of the topic too. So there's a number of different things. I'll kind of break it down because it's an interesting and different experience because one, there's so few books about Asian Americans to begin with. Like there's so few. As a matter of fact, when we were pitching this to a bunch of different publishers, um, the biggest comment we kept getting back during those meetings from other publishers were like, there's no other book on the market that does this. Like we looked for comps. What they call comps is comparative titles, because that's the biggest thing. Like if you're going to be like, oh yeah, like you're a musician, and be like, oh, like what's your music? Okay, I'm in, I don't know, classical, or like, oh, I do like, guitars. There is no other book like this. And that was the response we kept getting back, was like, we don't have anything to compare this to. So this has to be good.
Yeah.
Because if you screw this up, the implication is not only are the publishers like they're banking on, like they're paying for this. It's a product, but the entire industry is basically going to use this book as a guide to see if future books get made. So there's so much pressure. And then there's the pressure of how the hell do you talk about Asians? Like it's called big Asian energy. Asians represent 2,000 ethnicities. Like the whole like we're not a monolith thing is like no, we're like 60% of the freaking world population technically belongs. So like is in Asia. So like you can't talk about anything without there being 82 disclaimers, because if you ask 10 Asian people to tell you what it means to be Asian, you're going to get 35 answers.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's nothing.
So how did you do that? How did you reconcile that?
I wrote a very detailed disclaimer early on to be like, look, I'm going to generalize the shit out of everything. But at the same time, everything that I try to write in there, I try to back it up with research. So like literally right after I started putting together the ideas of the book, this book was 5 years in the making. It was like 3 years of planning and research. By the time that I had put together the notes, I already hired 2 research assistants just to be like, go find every Asian American study you can find. We're going to tag them. We're going to label them. We're going to see if there's anything that ties all this together. So we're not just talking about stories. And that was the thing, is that so many Asian American works out there are story focused, because we like stories are our narrative, it's our connectivity. But if you want to talk about this from a, well, let's say like a more developmental or more research focused thing, you need actual numbers, you need actual studies. And the truth is there's not many studies that were being done. And that was the biggest shock, was that there was not that many studies, because people were just getting told, if you went to your university and were like, hey, I want to do a research study on this, they were just being told, well, you don't need to do research on Asians. Asians are basically like honorary white people. And like that was constantly the feedback. That was a real thing. There was an actual quote when someone was like, who said like, if this was, it's too bad that your research topic is about Asians and not African Americans, because if it's African Americans, we could get funding. But for Asian Americans, we can't get funding.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of dive into there. But so, the first thing I did was just like, okay, well, let's see if we can find research studies. And then the second thing was like, let's just talk about as many of these things from lived experiences as possible. So it was interviews, it was case studies, it was looking at different people's experiences. And you start seeing that there's no one universal Asian identity, but there's a lot of similar colors in experiences, or similar echoes of storytelling and experiences. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, this is what I've seen work. This is what we've validated makes a transformation. And let's put it in there, because at the end of the day, it's not about me being right. It's about whoever is the right person this book is for, that they can get something out of it.
So to take a minute to talk about what this book is about and just get clear on that for people. I'm guessing this book is for Asian Americans, Asian people in the Western world who are trying to fit into the Western world's way of doing things.
Mhm.
and some of the misalignments there, some of the barriers
Mhm.
to success and leadership.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah.
right? Like, well,
Yeah.
what would you say? Like, who is this book for? What's it about?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, yeah, 100% Asian Americans who have been misunderstood. And
Mm,
I like to use the word misunderstood because there is so many universalities that we talk about in the book. We talk about communication styles, we talk about patterns of behavior, and how we show up and how we hold back. But a lot of this is based on the fact that this is written for third culture, which is like Asian diaspora, Asian Americans, is because we are from one culture from Asia, like our parents, our grandparents, or whatever it is. Like these cultures can get passed down up to 3 to 5 different generations that they found. So, like, yeah, sure. Like food taste can change really rapidly, music taste can change really rapidly from generation to generation, but they found the core cultural values like, like familial honor, collectivism, like these kind of Confucian values for East Asians, or collectivist values for South Asians, like that hierarchical nature, the honor nature, that face culture, like all these things that gets passed down 3 to 5 generations even after immigration.
mm,
So we looked at how that culture shows up in another culture, which is to say Western culture, the North Americans. To simplify it, I'll put it this way. Um, a lot of what we are stereotyped for, things like, oh, we're often seen as, oh, a lot of Asians seem like they're good at math, they're hardworking, but they're shy, or they're quiet, or they're not like the most outspoken. Like that's an existing stereotype that
mhm,
shows up a lot, right?
mhm,
And I think that there's a misunderstanding because really what that is coming from, it's coming from a culture of humility, as in like
mm,
especially a hierarchical culture of your family, for example, taught you like speaking in front of an elder, like disagreeing with an elder is disrespectful, or that like, oh, if you want to raise your hand and contribute your thoughts or like say something, you better make sure that that is the best freaking idea in the room before you say it, because otherwise how dare you take up space where somebody else could
mhm,
have a better idea,
mhm,
right? So, like, these cultural values make sense in a culture in which that's the base communication style. Like, if you're in Japan, there's these rules of like, even like when you go drinking after work, which to a lot of people is a requirement, like, there's like little like hidden things, like who orders first, or what
mm,
can you order, because you can't cause an inconvenience or a burden to other people.
mhm,
So, that makes sense in that culture. But if you take somebody from that culture and you put it into a Western culture, that person is seen as, oh, he's too soft spoken. He's not direct enough. He's just like a little bit. And sometimes that misinterpretation becomes about weakness.
uh-huh,
And I dealt with a lot of that when I was growing up. And honestly, for a long time, I just thought it was me. I just thought it was something wrong with me. I'm like, why am I so quiet? Like, why don't I have that, like, that gravitas or that assertiveness that I see, especially with a lot of guys in the group who are just like, they'll walk up and they'll just fucking swagger up there. And
yeah,
they just have that natural born individualistic alpha gravitas, right?
yeah,
And I would watch that and I'd be like, why don't I have that? Like what did they do? How did they learn that? But then it was me realizing, well, I just was brought up with a different cultural script.
mhm,
And there's nothing wrong with that cultural script as long as we know how to coexist in this one, integrate, right? Like, how do we integrate two cultures? And that's really what the book is about. It's integration, not um, not neglect, not like self-abandonment, not self-rejection, all of those things that really come off as hiding ourselves.
right. How to integrate both cultures into yourself. That's what you're
Mhm.
describing.
Exactly.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh,
Yeah. And that idea of integration is very specific because when it comes to, there's a term, it's called bicultural acculturation, bicultural integration, and it talks
mm,
about this. Like there's 4 levels that you can go up, including assimilation, which most of us think is what we're supposed to do. Because
right,
assimilation is that you release or abandon your past culture so you blend into mainstream culture.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're actually saying is that these social psychologists is that no, integration is actually the best form, because in integration, you never lose that. You bring all the best stuff from your old culture into the new one, and it
Mm-hmm.
improves that culture. And that's what it is that should be every society's goal, right? Like you take
Yes.
that humility and you take that, like, how do we bring more harmony? And like, I think there's a lot of things. I'm like, yeah, I actually think that the West is a little bit too individualistic sometimes. Like
For
almost
sure.
like there's, especially for the younger generations, I'm just like, you guys are a little bit too individualistic. Like it's starting to border a little bit on narcissism. Like
Yes. Yes.
and at the same time, I look at people in Asia, I'm like, yeah, you could use a little more individualism.
Yeah, this is so important, man. Is to be able to see the value in things without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Like
Oh yeah.
throwing the culture out because there's a weakness, you know?
Yes.
Being able to see how a particular culture serves a particular purpose, but that it has its own shadows. And on the
Mm-hmm.
other side, same, you know? And I love this word that you use, integration. You know, how can I, rather than like turn my back on all of my ancestors and the culture of, China, how can I like take the value from grandma, grandpa, great grandma, grandpa, um, and the things that they were teaching and the things that they learned in their lives, and then integrate that with the values of my current society into myself, into my being? Because in the end, yeah, we all live in a society, but we all have to live with our own personal code, our own personal way of showing up in the
Mm-hmm.
world. And once we become conscious of this stuff, that like, oh yeah, like I run programs that were given to me by my mom and dad, by my grandpa and grandma, by my neighborhood where I grew up, then we can introduce new programs. We can endeavor to change some of what's not working for us and bring in uh, new ways of being, So like I hear you saying that like you grew up feeling like, oh yeah, I'm showing up, quiet, shy, reserved. People are saying that this is me. I'm wondering if this is just me. And then at one point you woke up to the reality that like, oh, this is conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So is there a moment where you felt that sort of breakdown occurring, or a moment where you started to shift and integrate a new way of being? Because you're not that guy anymore. I do not even recognize the boy that you're describing to me. Like I don't know that guy. I know John Wang, big Asian energy, like confident, standing on top of a plane while it does a corkscrew through the sky, skydiving, like writing the leadership manual, coming into a men's organization that was at best 20% Asian guys at best. And, the rest probably predominantly white guys, and writing the first leadership manual, at least the first big one that's outside of our founder. Just this
Mm-hmm.
courage, this way of like stepping forward, this is the
Mm-hmm.
guy that I see. So like, was there a moment or two where that really shifted this for you?
Yeah. Um, from you and I met, I would say right around the time that that moment happened.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, I've been in like the personal development educational world for a while, but before I would say this transformational period that I went through, I was always focused on productivity. How do we do more? And it really
Hmm.
was about performance in the sense of like, how do I pretend to be seen? Not pretend, but be seen as a certain way. It was
Hmm.
about how do others see me rather than how do I see myself and how do I
Hmm.
actually show up? And I never realized how much of this were essentially protective mechanisms. And around the time that I would say I had just joined ARCA, I was going through a massive burnout time. I remember I was on stage giving a talk, like a presentation on actually productivity and achievement to a group of Asian Americans on like what they want to learn is like, how do I do more? And I was so stressed out that I actually had an ulcer brewing, and I didn't realize it. And it was so bad that I was unable to stand. I was in the middle of giving a talk, and I nearly passed out. And then I went to see a doctor, and the doctor was like, "Yeah, you have ulcers. You're like internally bleeding." And that was when I realized, okay, something wasn't right here. And the work that I started doing was compounded by the fact that I felt like there was always two versions of me. There was a version of me that I had to be with my family. There was a version of me that I had to be at my work and like when I'm with my white friends. And I was constantly switching back and forth. And I'm trying to be enough for one and then enough for the other. I was trying to be like white enough for my white friends and Asian enough for my Asian community. And it's a strange thing because I never felt like I was either. I never felt like I actually belonged to either place. I was just pretending. I was just trying to put on a performance. And that was so stressful because I was constantly like freaking out about how I was appearing that it was tensing my stomach. It was like this psychosomatic thing. Where that really came from was realizing, okay, where is that fear and that belief that I need to hide? And it was coming from psychological safety because I never felt like either community I could fully be myself in. But that's the thing, is that I never tested it either. It wasn't like I was getting outright rejected. And that was the thing, is like people think that being othered is like people don't let you through the door. No, it's not. It's walking through the door and being part of the group and still being lonely because you don't know how to talk to people, because you're still afraid of anyone seeing who you really are. And that was where I was at when we first met. I was just very much like trying to simultaneously being seen and also like hide myself at the same time. And that caused me basically to become very sick. And I was so stressed. I was bedridden. I couldn't sleep. I was just a mess. My whole life started falling apart. And that was what started the work. And the work was just going, okay, well, let me confront each of these piece by piece. And I at some point I came across a book. I think it was like Radical Honesty or something. And it was just like, go and be honest with people. Most of people's struggles are actually that they're not honest enough. A bunch of books. I was like, No More Mr. Nice Guy was one of them. Radical Honesty was the other one, and all these other books. And I started putting myself through these like experiments. So Radical Honesty was, I just did a year where I was like, you can't say anything that wasn't 100% true to yourself in the moment. And that was what led me to start sharing. I still remember so many times where I would just like, oh, I can't say that. And then it's like, as soon as you say you can't say that, you have to go and fucking say it.
Yeah, like this is like the movie Liar, Liar, but you did it for real.
100% like that movie, yeah. Nobody ever told me that Jim Carrey was going through a therapy practice, because the other side of that is you start going, oh, wow, like you can be seen and people accept you, and that you're not truly other the way you were feeling. And I'm not just talking about like in the Western world, it's also like in the other side. It was a strange thing. My 30th birthday, the scariest thing that I did at the 30th birthday wasn't when I went wing walking. It was when I decided to take all of my friends and throw them in the same room and being like, all right, everyone meet each other, which shouldn't be a big deal. But the person who hears this and is like, okay, I get why that's a big deal. You and me, brother, we get each other, right? Because like when you merge those groups, you're also merging parts of yourself.
What happened?
Nothing. Everyone just liked each other.
That's something. It's just not the thing you thought was going to happen, right?
100%. I thought that it was just, like they're going to know that this version of me is different from this version of me. And it was just like, oh, how do you know John? I was like, oh, I met him in men's group. Like, cool. How do you know John? It's like, oh, I know him from this like, entrepreneurs group I'm in. Oh, cool. And that was it. Like that was the totality of that. But it was the internal fear of being seen. It was the fear of being known that was deeper there.
Wow. Yeah.
The book, I just want to say this because the book actually has so many other things. Like it's communication. Like there's a whole manual in there on like how to speak more assertively and present more powerfully and all that kind of stuff. I'm really just talking about like the inner work here. But I actually think that the inner work is the most important work.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, that's the thing is like, you told it in your story, right? Like I spent my 20s focusing on the outer work, the
Oh,
productivity and like get stuff done. And I neglected my inner work. And then one day the the parts of myself that I had thought I could separate and fragment into multiple pieces, the parts of my life, the masks that I was wearing to show the
mhm,
world, to
mhm,
impress different groups of people, started closing in on me. The weight of those, the dissonance between those things, the weight of those things started to crush me. And I thought I could ignore it. I thought I could bypass it. And then I got sick. Right. And like, they say ulcers are stress related, and stress
yeah,
isn't just like my boss is yelling at me, I work too many hours. Stress is also an inner experience of feeling disconnected from yourself in some way, or like you're trying to juggle too many identities with too many people. That's stressful. It's very stressful, right? And
totally.
there's I would say in some ways there's nothing more stressful than being separated from your core self, from who you
Mm,
really are, right? And
that's it.
that is that feeling is like, yeah, I'm kind of myself over with these people, and I'm kind of myself over with these people, but I'm actually never fully myself with anybody.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. And
And
we
for
don't realize
you,
how much battery power that takes.
yeah.
Like the amount of energy that goes into keeping that mask on, into trying to convince everyone around you to believe that you are this person that you do not know, you do not feel like you should
Mhm.
be enough.
Mhm.
It feels exhausting
Mhm.
to have to carry that performance everywhere you go.
Yeah, and for you, it was the Asian side of your family and the Western or white side of your, social life, or Asian friends and Western friends, you could say.
Mhm.
But for so many people, it's such a universal thing. Like this thing you're describing, I have heard this thousands of times of like, oh, I'm this guy for this people, I'm this guy for these people. There's been
Mhm.
books written about that part because it's such a common thing in the human experience. We somehow all learn somewhere along the way to be performative and to put on a certain mask for these people, put on a certain mask for these people over here. And at some point, that all comes to a head, and we realize, like, wow, I can't sustain this. Like, this is exhausting, like you're saying, and it does make us sick. It makes us sick in the head, and eventually, it makes us sick in our bodies.
Yeah.
You know.
And ironically, it keeps us from doing the work that we're here to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe, with all these, if you turn on TikTok, there's like a billion different gurus trying to teach you how to be more confident or how to, like speak more powerfully or any of these things. Like if like really, it could all just be summed up really with the same things, which is self ownership.
Mm-hmm.
When you truly own yourself, and a lot of times the feeling that people get, it's like, well, what if like the version of myself is just like a slob who watches TV and smokes a lot of pot at home? And it's like, well, then we accept and look at why that part of you needed to numb the feelings every single day. Why do you need to keep yourself distracted? Then we can actually look at that and address it. But until you're willing to confront and let that part be seen, even if it's just by your own friends, even if it's just by you, there is no ability for you to move forward. So
Yeah.
people come to you and they're like, "Oh, I'm feeling stuck. Oh, like I feel stuck in my job. I feel stuck in my relationship." And it's the same thing we hear over and over and over again. And so much of that is like, well, what is keeping you stuck? It's not really external. For most of us, it's internal.
Yeah. 100%. You shared that too in your story around like, I had all of this stuff going on for me. I'm standing on stage with an ulcer. I'm going to collapse. I've got these two different parts of myself that are crushing me. I don't feel like I'm truly myself with anyone. And you embark on this journey. And one of those big turning points is when you decide to get everybody in the same room. And then you realize the difference between how you see yourself and how your friends see you.
Hmm.
You allow yourself to be seen by everyone, right? You took that brave step of like, okay, everybody, like, see me, right? And
Yeah.
lo and behold, everybody already did see you, right? Like
Ooh.
we
Yep.
started this episode talking about how we can kind of smell each other's bullshit. Like if we hang around someone for long enough, you can smell it.
100%.
And So we see through each other's masks pretty easily, right? Meanwhile, we all think we're doing a great job holding them up. So
100%.
you get everybody in the same room, and it's like, it's not a, they don't break out into some kind of culture war. It's like, well, hey, what do we have in common? Well, we all love John. He's amazing. Like, we love this guy's energy. Like, that's why we're friends with him. Well, what do you love about John? I love this. I love that. I love this. Right? Like, those people saw you in a way at that moment that you didn't see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you were playing all these games that we all think we have to play, wearing the masks, putting on the show, and they just love you for who you are. Like, I'm sure there was a few surprises, but like, you're speaking to this thing that I think is so beautiful about men's groups, and about just sitting with the same people over time, is like,
Mm-hmm.
they see through your masks, they see your core essence, they see your value. And if you're really lucky, those people will actually tell you that,
Mm-hmm.
and help you break down your masks, break down your walls, let them
Yeah.
go, so
Yeah.
that you can step fully into self-ownership, and
Absolutely.
do what you really are here to do in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember I was interviewing this a friend of mine, and we were talking about the ideas of leadership. And I asked him. He's actually the head of leadership development at Global Leadership Development at one of the big FANG companies. And I asked him, so like, what do you think is the secret of leadership? I was asking him on my show, and his answer is vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, we don't realize this, but like true leadership, we trust and believe in somebody only after we see their vulnerability,
Hmm.
because then they're human.
Yeah.
And it's a huge thing. So it's exactly as you talked about. Like, we have this belief that we do a great job pretending to others who we really are, that we've hidden away our flaws and our fears and our things that do not let us be truly in the presence. Like, gravitas is knowing that you have flaws and being okay with it and doing your best to mitigate or fix it, right? Is like working with it, not trying to pretend that you don't have any flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is that you could go into it, like, it's exactly the same thing, right? You can go into the room and whatever your pattern is, like if you have a pattern of dating people, for example, I'll use this as an example, right? Or if you have a pattern of dating people who are emotionally avoidant, chances are you could talk to like, just you can walk into a room of 100 people and you will find the most emotionally avoidant person, and you would just zoom in on that because we
Yeah.
have that ability to sense that about each other. And
Yeah.
I think that's the things that we're able to sense each other when they're not being their full true selves, when they haven't fully embodied and integrated that
Mm-hmm.
authenticity into
Mm-hmm.
who they are.
Yeah. You talk about not good enough syndrome,
Oof.
and the pattern of high achieving people, but particularly
Mhm.
high achieving Asian professionals, constantly feeling like they're not doing enough.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
what's under that? And I'm assuming that that was also very much in you in your 20s, before that moment where you were standing on the stage. Like,
Mhm.
what's underneath that not good enough, or that never enough feeling, and how do you heal that? Because I think most people listening to this are going to know that that's there,
Hmm.
but the question of what's underneath it and how to heal it, that's a deeper, harder one for people.
Yeah. Because there's always a story that we carry, especially from our childhood. I think that, this was the number one thing when I deal with people, because, they'll come and they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm stepping into a leadership role at X and Y company. I want to practice my speaking presentation and how I show up, and et cetera, et cetera. And we go, okay, sure. And again, so I could teach you the performance. I could teach you to fake it, but you won't be able to fake it for very long, especially if you're around people who are also high achieving. They could sense it like a shark in the water, like, blood in the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they know and they can sense when you're trying to put up a front. What is really always underneath that is a feeling of psychological unsafety. And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by psychological unsafety is the belief that I need to be more, I need to have done more, I need to achieve more in order to finally be seen as good enough to belong. And a lot of this comes from our childhood. So, I grew up in a traditional Asian parenting kind of dynamic, which is to say, my parents had high expectations. They wanted me to like learn the violin and, go to a top school and go be a doctor or a lawyer. Like these like cliches that I say, I think is like very resonant with probably a few people in the group. Because I think that this oftentimes comes from two things. One, there is a cultural value, especially around Confucian cultures, where academic achievement is extremely well valued. And
Mm-hmm.
two is this idea that, especially if you're an immigrant, you have to prove yourself, right? There's this like, your parents sacrificed so much for you. They did all these things to bring you here. So you better shape up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's various ways that this could show up. Like, for example, a common stories that I, hear and I've talked about myself is like the first time that I gave my mom like a report card. Instantly, okay, I'll share this. This is so funny. Okay, this is actually happening. I was right before this call, I was going through some old photos for we're doing a thing. And I see a grade 7 yearbook photo of me from when I was in grade 7 in Canada. And listed on, how they have those yearbooks and you write down like these like question answers, things are like, what's your
Yeah.
highlight of the year? Like, what are your
Yeah.
accomplishments and what's your future goals? And like, I
Yeah.
see all these other kids, they have like future goals, get a gold medal in mountain biking, future goals, like go and like become a doctor. My future goal was need more A's.
Wow.
No, I'm not. That's an actual thing. Like I'm looking at this and I just started laughing, and also I'm like, oh, grade 7, John.
It speaks to where you were at the time. Like you just hyper focused on
Yeah,
perfection in school.
yeah. Because the idea was that anything less than that was a failure,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody else is always doing better. So you start to carry this, right? Because I remember bringing back like a 92% or something like that on my math test. I was so proud of this, and I gave it to my mom because I'm terrible in math, contrary to all stereotypes. And I still remember the time where she looked at it and she just like, "Okay, what happened to the other 8%?" And then followed by like a barrage of like, oh, your sister did this or your cousin did this, that kind of things. And that's a not like again, these are a little bit stereotypical, but it's a pretty common enough experience.
Mm-hmm.
But the underlining belief that you take on from that is whatever your accomplishments are not enough, because
Mm-hmm.
so long as somebody else is better, then they are more deserving than you at not just praise, but more importantly at being seen and recognized as belonging wherever it is that you are, at the
Mm-hmm.
job that they're in, at the position, at the dreams, the goals that they want. You're like, they deserve it more because they've achieved it. So I deserve it less until I've achieved it. And we get into this deserving and this achievement treadmill where we like just like run and run and run and run, and we get the next achievement and we immediately discount it.
Yeah.
So of course that's going to cause us to shy away or to feel lesser than when we show up amidst our other peers who seem so confident and so comfortable in their positions, because we
Mm-hmm.
go, oh, right, everyone might not have figured out yet, but I actually don't belong here. I'm actually not good enough. I just need to
Mm-hmm.
fake it a little longer.
So it's not humility at that point. You're not describing humility. You're
Mm-mm.
describing this kind of like self-erasure, self-erasing,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
never good enough
Mm-hmm.
type of
Yeah.
mentality.
True humility is a recognition of your value and refusing to let that become ego to think you're superior then, right? It's like,
Mhm.
I know that I've done some great things in my life. Thank you for acknowledging that. And I don't see that as making it better than you. We're
Mhm.
all equal here. I recognize your value. I want to lift you up.
Mhm.
That's true humility. True humility is not somebody pays me a compliment and I go, oh my God, I'm so ashamed of that. Oh, because like I've done nothing and I'm going to self reject it. Like I
Mhm.
don't feel comfortable accepting recognition. Like if I genuinely feel shame when somebody is trying to pay me a compliment, that's not humility. That's just self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah. Low self-worth. Yeah, and I think the difference in the cultures, and like let's like we could just flesh this out together, but because I've heard this story around where'd the other 8% go from plenty of Western men and
Oh,
women,
totally.
right? So there's the critical parent archetype that's like always focused on what you didn't do
Mhm.
and not praising what you did do, not lifting you up. But the response to that culturally, it seems like from the Asian culture is like, because of that, you shrivel up and hide. Like that needs to be your response. Because you're
Mm.
not the top, because you don't belong, you need to shrivel up and hide and like, you know, be small
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the Western culture, you certainly could choose to respond that way. You could shrivel up and hide. But there's actually lots of people over here on this side who are like, they take that and they use it as fuel to like be big. You know, I can't tell you how many like high powered or ultra successful people that I've talked to and asked like, hey, what's in there? What, and you know, and we dig into the not good enough story, and it's the same thing that you're describing, but their
Mhm.
response to it was like, I'm gonna fight my way to the top. You know, because that's kind of like in the American way, you know, it's the American ethos. Like, we broke off from Britain, like, F you guys, we're forming our own country, man. Like, they're rebels. Like that, the culture was
100%.
formed on a rebellion, you know?
100%. And that's the individualistic, right? Like that's the individual. It's like the like there's these sayings like the squeaky wheel gets the cheese. Sorry, the squeaky wheel does not get the cheese. The squeaky wheel, like where the hell did that come from? The
I like
squeaky
that
wheel
though.
gets the cheese. There's a squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Is the saying. And then in the counter, like in Asian cultures, it's really common to hear like the like tall poppy syndrome, right? In Australia, they also have that. Like it's like the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. You know,
Mm,
the flower that grows too tall is chopped. They're
right.
all very violent metaphors, right? But it's the same thing, which is like if you show up, if you are too loud, because there's a cultural thing of face. So there's this concept called face culture, which is like saving face and protecting face. Like it's a
Mm,
big thing to the point that historically people literally killed themselves because they lost face.
mm-hmm,
Because it's so shameful, not just to you, again, in a collectivist identity, it's like you're bringing shame not onto yourself, which is fine, you can shrug it off, but your family and your
mm-hmm.
ancestors and your community. And it's like that's a lot of weight to carry. That's a lot of shame to carry.
Yeah.
So what's the safest thing to do? Well, keep yourself small. Be a
Mm-hmm.
little bit quieter. Don't be too loud. Don't be too flashy. Because what if you show up and you're proud and it turns out somebody else is more deserving of that? Oh, now you just look like an idiot,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now you brought that shame to your family. Now you brought that shame to yourself and those around you.
So yeah, how do you teach people this? Like, how do you teach people to recover from this syndrome of not good enough, from this like what you might call toxic humility? Like, how do
Mhm.
you teach that? How do you guide people through that without it being performative?
Well, it's always looking at the story underneath it, right? Like these are childhood scripts, cultural scripts, environmental scripts, social scripts, right? That we take on. I learned from my environment when I was in high school, being one of the few non-white kids when I first moved here, that bringing Asian food to school was not acceptable. So you
Mm,
learn to hide it. I learned from, applying to universities that, if you seem too Asian, they might deduct points on your academic scores. So you try to do more white things like play sports, you know,
mm,
like these are generalizations, but they're pretty common.
mm,
Um, you and at the same time, you learn that if you learn that speaking up is not safe, if you learn that, self diminishment and self abandonment is a safer passageway, then we look at the beliefs underneath it and we go, at one point, this was a survival mechanism. How do we undo that? And I think this is where letting ourselves be seen in our imperfections bit by bit is part of the work. Whatever it
mm,
is, that's the story. For some, it's not necessarily hiding. For some, it might be that it's being seen as messy or imperfect. For
mm,
some, it might be just be seen as, okay, like I've been a people pleaser or caretaker for most of my life because that was my role in the family. And for once, I'm going to set some boundaries and realizing, oh, I'm setting boundaries and I haven't died yet. So
mm.
all of these things, in the book, we list out like different types of exercises depending on where that belief is coming from.
Hmm.
Is it not good enough because I haven't done enough achievement? So can I let myself be a little bit messier? Because there's, excellence, and it just like, this is your integrity of excellence. Like, you just believe in being excellent, and you like to do good work. And there's maladaptive perfectionism, which is
Yeah.
based on fear. So every single one of these, there's a toxic version, right? Like, there is, duty to support your family because culturally that's your belief and that's why you value. And then there's toxic obligation, which is, I'm only helping because I feel like if I'm not, then I should be ashamed and I'll be outcast.
Hmm.
So there's always a healthier version to take on. And that's the part that lets us rise to our truest self, our big Asian energy, so to speak.
Yeah. So if I could reflect it back, undoing this stuff requires first to like go into it, like
Mhm.
dig in, ask yourself deep questions, have some conversations with someone who maybe even has been on the journey, talk to a therapist, do some journaling, like read some books that open your world a little bit and help you
Mhm.
self-reflect.
Mhm.
See what it is that's behind that not good enough story. First, see the story. See the story for
Mhm.
what it is. Ask yourself what's underneath this. What came up in my childhood that created this, and what is the story, A lot of times actually really close friends and romantic partners um who are deep seers can really help you with this. Like some of my
Mhm.
best friends and my wife have
Mhm.
been huge for me in like pointing out ways that I show up, noticing like the links to my family because she knows them, and mannerisms and like ways that I hold back, all this stuff. She can sort of help me flesh out what that not good enough story is.
Mhm.
But so the point is the first piece being awareness. Like you got to
Yes.
see it, you got to notice it, and you got to like look, dig in there, go in there and discover what it's about for you,
Mhm.
And then step two being vulnerability is what I heard you say, like,
Absolutely.
okay, willingness to vulnerably step forward into a potentially different way of being,
Mhm.
going
Mhm.
against the grain, going against that pattern, trying something new. And that kind of comes in the form of a practice, like,
Mhm.
okay. And in your case, you talked about we talked about you writing this captain's manual at the beginning of the episode. You wrote that in basically a draft format. It was unfinished, and you put it out there for us. And you're like, you
Yeah.
sent it to me and a couple other guys, and you're like, guys, would love your reflection on this. Like, should we change anything? And we did change some things, but we also just posted it to the captain's folder for guys to use in the meantime before it is perfect.
Mhm.
And it never, I would say, reached perfection. And you had the courage to just put it out there. So I don't know how hard that was for you, but
Oof.
just like I'm just noticing that you just did that, and that perhaps that was one of those practices that we're referring to here. Like people might be like,
Oh,
what does this actually look
100%.
like? That's what it looks like.
100%. You
Hmm.
know, the saying "fake it till you make it." I have you heard of that before?
Yeah.
I personally have a personal hatred of that saying because I hate the idea that it's faking it. I'm like, do it till you feel it,
Hmm.
right? Like, you just got to trust to do it, and it takes baby steps. Yeah, dude, I'm the kind of guy who, for most of my entire life up until I started doing all this work, I would send an email, I would panic and like undo and like revise, like, oh, like, wait a second, is this word like too much? Oh, I shouldn't use don't, I shouldn't use a contraction, I use do not. Like, I would obsess over every little thing.
Hmm.
And where I started learning was to step just allowing myself to be seen.
Hmm.
Just being like, okay, I'll send it out. It's imperfect. Here you go. This is, who are you to write this captain's manual? Like, I don't, nobody else is doing it. Like,
Yeah.
that was my answer, was nobody else was doing it, so therefore I'll go do it.
Hmm.
And I think that if we realize how much value, if you, anyone who's listening, realize how much value is hidden behind that fear, that gap of not being seen. Oof, that is the true life that you are meant to live.
Mm-hmm.
That is the
Mm-hmm.
true life that you're meant to lead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just listening to you, it seems like a crucial piece to the vulnerability, to the practice of doing the thing is courage. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like you let that story of I got to do it because no one else is doing it push you forward,
Mm-hmm.
and you set aside the story of who are you to be doing this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You leaned on that other one even though it was more uncomfortable for you, and you moved forward, you know, and you created a thing. And you when you create the thing, when you practice that step, you are actively rewiring that story for yourself. Because when you do that and you put it out there and you don't get a bunch of negative comments and a bunch of criticism from people, and instead you get like, hey, wow, thanks, man. That was awesome. Like we were all waiting for something.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's
Or
reinforcement.
or or just like, even if it was just like, hey, like that was a good start.
Yeah.
I would add this, I would change this.
Yeah.
Like allowing and accepting that, great. Thank you for sharing that. I
Mm-hmm.
can allow that imperfection. Like that's leadership. And we
Yeah.
don't think of it as leadership, but why wouldn't you want a leader who's willing to admit when they didn't catch things? Why
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you want a leader who is not above realizing that they're human and, in fact, is just so dedicated to bettering the whole team that they're willing to acknowledge that?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The Shalina, my wife, is she just interviewed Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of
Whew.
Eat, Pray, Love,
Oh,
and Big Magic, and multiple other best-selling books. She just went to her workshop in Vancouver, and she's feeling so inspired by Elizabeth and how she shows up. And the main thing that Shalina keeps saying about Elizabeth is just how raw and human she is. Like
mhm,
her leadership comes from her sharing her vulnerability. It comes from her, like, that's all of her writing, her poetry. It's all just like so raw and
mhm,
encapsulates the human experience with all of its pain and joy and all of the adventure in between so
mhm,
well. And that's why Shalina looks up to her, because she's so real. She's so courageously real, right?
mhm, mhm.
And that's it. That's it.
That's
That's
it.
that's the best kind
That's
of
it.
leader. You know, that's the
Like,
most
yeah,
trustworthy
we
type
we
of
don't
leader.
we don't need to see another polished, especially these days, AI polished. Oh, right.
Yeah.
We don't need another polished version of, like, oh, like, let me show you only the perfect parts.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're here for. We want to see what you're going through now, because that's what inspires us, because
Mm-hmm.
we recognize our own humanity. So why wouldn't we want to follow people who also recognize theirs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are in a time where humanity and humanness is, in a way, it's like the value of that is increasing every day, right? The
Mm.
more the world changes with AI and the way that that's affecting things, the more our humanity becomes uh, almost special
Yes.
within all of that. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
And I'm gonna out myself here as an AI optimist. I actually think that, like, great. Everyone's fear is AI is going to take all of our jobs, and I'm like, well, we're going to make new jobs. We're just going to change. Our social structure will change. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to have more value placed around the imperfections, the
Mm-hmm.
realness, the authenticity. We are already seeing that. We get so tired of the same AI generated bunk that
Mm-hmm.
I think what we really are going to continuously desire is connectivity, true connectivity, human to
Yeah.
human.
Yeah. Human to human.
Mhm.
Well, brother, it's great to connect with you, human to human, man.
Human to
And
human.
to just congratulations on your book. And
Thank you so much.
I know this is like your 28th or 29th interview. Uh, I
I
can't
love it though.
imagine.
I love it. I love it so much. I love talking about this, and of course, I love being here with you because this is just such a special connection that we've had. And thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. You've always got a special place in my heart, John. It's great to have you on the show and to have another conversation with you, man.
Thank you.
Okay, brother, may your book sell millions and millions and millions of copies. May you never be able to hide again for the rest
Oh,
of
I
your
like that
life.
one. There you go.
Okay, folks, go get the book, Big Asian Energy. It's out there everywhere. Leave a review and share this conversation, share this podcast with somebody who might be inspired by this man. All right, John, all the best. Until next time.
Thanks, brother. Until next time.